Hi, sports fans. Let's go to Arizona. Talk about Gus Greenbaum, little known player, but an important guy in the history of organized crime. If you read the book, The Godfather, saw the movie, there's Mo Greene, who they shoot his eye out. He's the gambler in Vegas. Mo Greene, Gus Greenbaum, so sort of an amalgam, although, especially more in the book, the character is really based on Bugsy Siegel, and you can see that. There's an interesting story that Meyer Lansky was watching a movie about Siegel one day. And Siegel is portrayed basically as an ape with a gun. He's screaming, yelling. And at the end of the film, the guy says to Meyer Lansky, we should sue. And Lansky says, why? In real life, he was worse. By the way, the actor who played Mo Green was Alex Rocco, who was from up Boston. And he was a hanger-oner with the Winter Hill Gang, a group of Irish thugs, basically. And he was at what they call a time in New England. It was Labor Day, 1961. And Georgie McLaughlin, who was with a different Irish gang, the Charlestown Mob. When I say Irish gang, it means the hierarchy was Irish. Not obviously, but it's Boston. It's easy to get Irish people to go to work up there for you. Irish thugs to go to work there for you. So anyway, they're having a time. Georgie McLaughlin walks up to Alex Rocco's girlfriend, makes a few remarks. Rocco, they get into a pushing match. The Winter Hill Gang is there in force, and they beat Georgie McLaughlin to a pulp. Hence, the Irish Wars begin, and they would last almost a decade. Interesting about Rocco, in October of 1961, he was arrested for suspicion of murder of Bernie McLaughlin. The murder was probably done by one of Winter Hill Gang, but Rocco was seen driving the getaway car, but nothing came of it. Charges were dropped. It just disappeared. Let's go back to Greenbaum. Greenbaum and his brothers moved from New York to Chicago to Arizona in the 20s, and they were hard-working guys, and they opened up a small empire. They had retail shops, they had insurance companies. They were sharp. They were smart businessmen, and they had a gambling concession there. The gambling concessions you had were run by mobs, so Chicago ran most of that. So he was aligned with various gangsters, but he nor his brothers were gangsters in the sense that we think with, guns and so forth. They were just gamblers. He was a big investor. He had a lot of money in the Flamingo Hotel. Some think around 500 grand. It was a tremendous amount of cash. He had investments also in the El Cortez, the Las Vegas Club, so aside from the Flamingo. And anyway, Bugsy Siegel ends up dead. And so the mob guys come in and say, look, somebody's got to run this casino. We just can't have it standing there in the desert. You got to go. And he was a logical choice. He was a businessman, a very good businessman. He understood gambling. And to the bosses, back east, for them, Arizona, Nevada, they're all sort of the same place. They didn't know. They said, fine, he's out there, let him do it. So he did two things when he went to Vegas. He made the casino run well. That was the first thing. So under Siegel, who was not a bottom line guy by anybody's definition, under him, like say the cook would buy 100 steaks, and then he'd keep 10 and 90 would go out the back door and he'd sell them to other restaurants. That, believe me, that didn't happen with the Greenbaums. Those guys were sharp. They understood bottom lines. They understood budgets. They understood management. And also to change the perception of the Flamingo, his managers had to wear ties. And if you see in most of the casinos out there, the dealers, it's lessened up now, but the dealers and everybody will say, has a tie on. So that was it's the 50s. He wanted the place to look buttoned down. It's not a danger. You can come here. Yes, we had a gambler who got shot, run up, but that was a bump. Come on in. It's a wonderful place. And to make sure, so having a well-run casino is pointless if people are too afraid to come to Vegas. And after the war boom, where GIs had stopped there by train, it could have died. Could have died on the vine. So he went to Los Angeles, where most of his money would come from, most of the folks for the casino would come, and he launched this enormous goodwill campaign. He gave money to virtually everything. Um, Sometimes he was the center of that, but usually not. He didn't want to be the center. He just wanted people. He wanted to get the job done, make Vegas profitable, make his hotel profit. It worked, and it worked very well to some extent. That Bugsy Siegel gets all the credit, but uh, there were other hotels there long before Siegel. It was Greenbaum who kept that place alive. Anyway, uh, let me just go on for a little bit. He did other things. Like, he made sure the rooms are clean. God is in the details. He wanted the rooms clean. Meals cost virtually nothing under him because you spend your money at the tables and pay virtually. So the food. He was the guy who came up with selling the food at cost. He hired people to park your car as soon as you got there, bang. That was something new. Prior to that, guys, it was a big thing, by the way, in the 40s and 50s, valet service, but it wasn't very good. Under him, it was good. They got in, they got your car, boom, they were out of there. The pool was clean. Little details, and that's what made it work. I want to tell you something about these Irish gangs up in New England. I was living in Rhode Island. I'm an Irish American, so I'm not criticizing. I'm proud of my Irishness, but I knew some of these guys, and wow, the mob guys would never cause problems with people. They just minded their business. They stuck to crime. There was a hierarchy. They weren't angels, but the Irish guys up there, in my experience, you had to be careful. You had to you didn't want to look at them the wrong way because you know what I mean. They'd want to. What are you looking at? They were guerrillas. They weren't. They were bad news, really. And so some people say, "How did a war go on for 10 years?" Believe me, you get two Irish guys having a fight; it can go on forever. I just wanted to bring that in. I had some scary experiences with them, and I learned to stay very, very far away from them. I had a friend, God bless him, he's still my friend, who didn't. Uh, he thought he'd be a gangster, aligned with him. Boy, he did. I don't know what he did. I think he stole something, actually. It was a minor thing. I don't know if I'm rambling, but if you're old enough, they're forgotten what they're called. Tape decks. You had them in your car, and some guy had stole tape decks, and he stole the stolen tape decks, and they belonged to one of the Irish mobs, and they almost beat him to death. It was bad, man. Even months later, it was black and blue. It was really bad. Anyway, so uh, he runs the Riviera and he leaves. The mob now has opened he runs the Flamingo, and the mob has now opened the Riviera Casino Hotel. It's a massive place by standards of the day, and it goes bankrupt. In 3 months, it goes bankrupt because, again, they brought in thugs, gangsters to run these places. They don't know how to run. So they call Greenbaum and say, "You got to come back in here. You got to run this place." And he says, "Look, I can't. I'm tired." He's got more money than God at this point. But also, he was one of these guys who lived in constant fear. He's got cancer. If he saw any bump on it, it was cancer. He was going to die. He was always going to have a heart attack. He did have serious back problems, hence the heroin, probably. But he said, "No, I don't need this. I don't want this. You deal with it." And I should think running a startup casino is a lot of work. The mob responded by strangling his sister-in-law, a 75-year-old woman, 75, named Leon Greenbaum. So he came back. He came back, unfortunately, at a bad time. The McClellan Committee was looking into organized crime. I've said this before. They had all that information from Kefauver, who started at scratch. So they knew where to look. And they had John F. Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, on the committee. And Bobby Kennedy is the chief investigator. If you know anything about here's how that works. The chief investigator is the guy who can lead the committee to wherever he wants it to go. He can be shot down by somebody on the committee. That's true, but the guys on the committee, I don't know, they're on 50 committees at one time. The chief investigators are the guys, we need to do this, this, and that. I think I've also said this before. I'll say it again. I admire the Kennedys. I have a picture of Robert and Bobby Kennedy on my wall. With that said, there were politicians. They looked at Kefauver and what that had done to him. Man, that made him. Kefauver was a hard-working guy. I'll give him that, but he didn't have much else going for him, really. And he almost became president. Remember, he ran, and John F. Kennedy was going to be his vice president. The Kennedys saw that, and they just thought, we got to do this. And so they leap on this committee. Bobby Kennedy did a hell of a job. He brought in Valachi. He did a lot. But he had this obsession, and rightfully so, with Jimmy Hoffa. He was going to nail Jimmy Hoffa. Hoffa did originally a lot for the working man. He did. We owe him a lot. I come from the working class. We owe him a lot. But, he just didn't stop the mob when he should have stopped them. He let them weasel their way into too many locals. And Bobby Kennedy was going to put an end to that. And he did. He sent them to prison. It was just a matter of time. The mob probably figured that Kennedy, was he smart, would get a weasel like Valachi or somebody a little bit smarter who knew more, would tell them, look, they're getting the money to build Las Vegas and other places from Hoffa, from his Teamsters. And he'd put one and one together, and the whole thing would fall apart. Everybody would get indicted, By the way, something that's often overlooked, I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying this is what happened. When they gave him the Teamsters loan in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they got all the money back, they never lost money on that. And they got the money back at what would be exorbitant rates. They told them, we're going to give it to you, but at 20 points. And they got it all back. Not saying they should have done it. It's wrong to take people's money and do that with it. A lot of guys depended on that money to retire. But anyway, the mob saw that coming. They thought if they get to Greenbaum with his drug habits and his crazy behavior, can we trust this guy? Who's he gonna talk to? What's he gonna say? He made him nervous. It's not good to make, the bosses of Chicago and New York mobs nervous. The other thing is he was suspected of stealing from the casino. So even drunk or high, very few people on the planet understood the mechanisms of gambling like Greenbaum did. And he knew how to steal. He knew how to steal to make it look like everything was fine. You're not supposed to do that. The thieves don't want you stealing from them. So that may have been part of the problem. Also, he had points. When he said, I'll come back, I'll run the Riviera, and I've got points in the casino, so I want point in the Flamingo. I want points in the Riviera. Tony Arcota, who was just coming out to his own running the mob in Chicago, I think he said, look, I want these points. And I think the reason he may have said it is he knew Greenbaum was going to be dead. And Greenbaum, from what I understand, said, no, I'm not selling the points. So my guess is they killed him. They went to his family, look, we strangled your daughter-in-law here. We shot him to kill Greenbaum. Give me the points. And they gave him the points. That would be my theory. Anyway, one day on December 3rd, 1958, the maid comes into the Greenbaum home in Phoenix. She opens the door, and there's Mrs. Greenbaum, Bess Greenbaum. She's face down on the sofa. The killer spread out a newspaper around her head, I think to soak up the blood. Why in the hell they do that? I don't know. And she has pillows on either side of her head to keep her head in place because they had whacked her with some sort of blunt instrument. And then they strangled her with one of her husband's neckties. They really wanted her dead. When the cops showed up, they find Greenbaum. He's in their bedroom. He's sprawled across two twin beds. The electric heating pad that he wore was on. The TV's on. He's in his silk pajamas. Doesn't that just make sense? Gangster in silk pajamas. The 35 millimeter gun he's got never went into use. They had come in. They cracked his skull badly from the back, and that's what killed him. Was this enormous blow to the back of the head. And then they slashed his throat for good measure from ear to ear, so that when the ambulance guys picked it up, the body came and then the head stayed, so they had to pick it up. And they really wanted this guy dead. It was a 9-inch knife. That's what they know. Supposedly, the 3-carat diamond was missing, and I don't know. The killer was more than probably a guy named Marshall Caiafano. He was a professional. He was a serial killer for the mob. He was a lunatic. Um, he, I don't think he's going to take anything from that place because let's say he takes the. He was living out in Vegas in those days, but let's say he takes the diamond ring. He goes back to Chicago. He tries to hawk it. Somebody finds out it belongs to Greenbaum. It can get traced back. As it was, Arcota didn't like him in the first place, so he would have killed him for that. So I don't know about that. Nothing else was taken from the apartment. Uh, they found shoe prints.